Hello, my name is Dominic Underhallhouse and welcome to another episode of Moonbreaker. It's been a while since I've made any Moonbreaker content. I do apologise, there's been a lot going on and I needed to just basically be able to record something I could sit down, record as and when I needed to and get as many knocked out at once. Hence why there's been lots of Chaos Gate Demon Hunters and not much variety and not much Moonbreaker recently. So hopefully now I'll be able to pick a bit back up. I'm going to try and get some gameplay sorted out, I'm going to try some more of the experimental side, and hopefully, if all goes to plan, have a few recorded games to sort of have a watch through of other people playing. But that one is only a maybe, so we'll see what happens from there. So the first thing I want to do is go through 3 of the posts that that Flavor Charlie has made over the last month or so. And these are ones that I started doing these videos a while ago, and unfortunately I didn't get to finish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 2 videos with each of the remaining 3 so far, and hopefully we can just learn a bit more. Even though these posts have been around for a while, not everyone has seen them, and also I haven't read them through fully either, so this is actually still new to me, even though it's been around for a while, so don't worry, this is still a genuine reaction to it. There's one I've skipped, which is Pacifier Oatly, only because that's already in the experimental version of the game, and possibly the live version? I think in the live version as well. Either way, Oatly already exists, we know what that does, so let's see what the new ones do. If you're enjoying the content, the first thing I want to say is make sure you like, comment, subscribe, join us on Patreon in the description. Anything you do to support the channel is really appreciated. But for now, let's see what we've got. Upcoming unit, Motivator at Z. Next in our upcoming crew will be releasing as part of our Servants of Yi-Aweti culture. Here's a bit about the servants from Brandon's World Bible, that's an exciting thing. I'd love to be able to read more of that. We worked on this together, but we just helped guide him what would fit into the game, because Brandon Sanson, the author, did a huge amount of work on the world building for this game, but there's obviously a lot that goes with it from the developer side as well. The servants are a race of repurposed robots who've adopted Cholek society and philosophies. They've dedicated themselves to the preservation of their small planet and the animals who live upon it. So the interesting about this, the servants of Yi-Aweti, I did think for a while that their look is fairly similar to Cholek. You know, it's a machine race, but they do have that Cholek vibe. So it's interesting that they're sort of like a subset of robots who've adopted that culture. That's really interesting. Created during the First War of Desecration, really want to hear more about the wars. The servants were harvesters, robots sent to planet to collect resources and suppress the local population. Nice and cheerful. For the most part, their job was to strip a small moon of its resources, drill out as much cinder as they could, and bring it all back to the main army for use. They weren't specifically warriors, although they did have weapons to suppress local populations. Lovely dystopian corporate future there. That's definitely giving me like Altera vibes. Can tell that there's a Subnautica sort of mindset behind it potentially. So we wanted a bunch of often friendly but sometimes nasty looking robots that had non-combat purposes. The idea for Motivator at Z was that it was originally a mining robot before awakening to find a higher purpose. More on that later. Here was the concept. So we've got this sort of almost like arcing spine, we've got some drills, got some saws, proper mining equipment with like a glowing orb of cinder and some sort of cinder chunks here that look like some sort of collection basket. And this looks like a laser, so I'm assuming we might have a laser. And because we're a miniatures game, we spend a lot of time finding dynamic, visually interesting poses for our units, and we need to make sure the silhouettes are distinctive. That's a really good point. So they have clear visual identity and stand out from the other units. This is where we landed for final scale and pose, always with our reference at Maximus. Yeah, that's not a bad pose, that's a bit of a... yeah, you know... I like that, that's a pretty decent pose. You're not going to forget that in a while, especially with like the overarching bit there. What should this guy do? Clearly had something to do with his drill. Unlike the first Subnautica prototype, we don't have maps we can drill into, so he had to find something else. As a culture, the servants are all about disruption, manipulation, and non-lethality, so using that drill as a weapon would be a real missed opportunity. Then when we added cinder piles and command and control, it felt like something we could lean into. Bear with me just a moment while I quickly just remove Facebook. Apologies for anyone who just heard that and got distracted by their own Facebook pages. So, cinder piles. Okay, we know about cinder piles. Using these piles, this is what we came up with. It may change before we release it. So June-ish may no longer be the case, just to clarify. It might looking like it may now be August, but we're not entirely sure yet. So, knockback pushes unit on hit, which is quite good. Got like the Zax effect, but with a melee unit. 2 cost, 1 melee, 10 health. Create cinder piles at location, so not using it as a weapon but using it to create cinder. That's quite fun. So you could make a cinder pile, but then there's the risk of them using it to blow you up. Very interesting. I feel like more interaction with cinder piles would be useful. The idea that he's digging into the map and digging up cinder piles, you can use them for gaining cinder, but notice his melee attack with Zac style knockback, which means you can attack them with his melee attack and move the piles, means you can corral the piles into advantageous spots for yourself, or fling them like bombs towards your enemies because they blow up. These two areas feel like they can bring Digging Field to life as well as manipulation and disruption. They can be lethal with these cinder bombs, but that seems secondary in both theme and utility. For a strategy game that's all about resources, it seems like creating more resources is a key tool in the toolbox. There you have it. Curious what you guys think. PS, if you come up with something cooler that fits or changes to these units that you think work better, please tell us. We still have time to change them. So I'm not going to go into the comments because I don't know, what there's going to be, what sort of information is going to be. I'd rather just keep this to be sort of my thoughts on it. One thing that I kind of like the idea of is the idea of pushing the cinder piles I think is fantastic. I think that's really, really interesting. I think it maybe should have something along the lines of, if it pushes a cinder pile, you can potentially change either the cinder pile's health to 1, or if it pushes units on hit, maybe it pushes cinder piles further, or knocks them a significant distance, and something along that, just so it feels like there's more manipulation. Because if you only hit it and it moves as far as Zac's knockback, that's not going to be particularly impactful, but something that knocks it further, and even just maybe a remote detonation option. We've got this thing up here that looks like a laser, so it feels like we've got 3 parts of the model. We've got the drill, the saw, and what I'm assuming is a laser. So the drill to dig things up, the saw to attack, and it feels like the laser could be used for sort of a remote detonation of cinder piles. So just detonate any cinder pile in line of sight, or something along those lines. It would need a cinder cost in itself, but that would be my opinion as to where to go with that unit, just to add a little more depth to it, to sort of fit the model. But all in all, I think that's a really cool idea. I think it's going to be very difficult to make work is the problem. I think it's going to be one of those things that has got a lot of potential, but you really need to build your whole list around it. The chances are that if you're building creating a cinder pile at your location, then the enemy are going to be able to use that against you just as much as you are with them. So you need to be able to at least push it back far enough that you're not in range of it, and potentially even just maybe even like a directional push, like an ability that knocks it in a certain direction or something like that. Because if you move to the location that you want it, then you have to dig it up. You can't then move again and knock it back. So I don't know, that might be a bit convoluted, but all in all, a really cool design. I think it's definitely got a lot of potential, especially if there's more cinder pile synergy units, so I'm definitely keen to see that. So next up, we've got Charger Makoa. So definitely one of our more recent designs. We haven't implemented or tested yet, so it could definitely change before we release it. The idea was to channel energy from the sky or from your ship and reproject it somewhere on the field, or possibly the reverse. An early idea was to have it recharge your ship assists so you could use them twice in a turn, but with ship assist remove, not forever though, it's coming soon. I believe that's going to be, we need some other channel. I think that's going to be in the single player mode and possibly still in cargo runs, that sort of thing, but maybe they're coming back in unit form as well, so that's something to look at as well. Here's the concept we are working with. Now this is interesting because this is the part of the model that's clearly become Ecti Overcharge, one of the cargo run bosses, this little collection thing, so it'll be interesting to see where they've gone. Obviously not a very scary or overtly offensive unit, with no visible weapons to speak of, but Cinder contains great power and potential. Here is the unpainted 3D sculpt. So it's sort of like a praying mantis charging port, which I like as well. The painted model here. At this point the model's looking great, but we've removed ship assists and need a totally new ability. A couple of weeks ago, Grissy and I were brainstorming for this unit and got inspired by the old Orbital Strike. So Grissy, as I say, another member of the development team, used to be a member of the community, ended up doing a lot of work on sort of statistics and numbers and working out what was good for Moonbreaker, ended up being hired onto the team, so that's really great to see. The version of this that works the best gave a 1-turn warning and then a lot of damage in the targeted area. We like the drama and power of that ability, and it worked well within a turn-based game like Moonbreaker. The delay lets us really crank up the power, and of course your opponent could take advantage of that too. Moving your own units into it and causing mayhem, could we take that same approach and channel the friggin' sun? So here's the ability and stats we've currently settled on, again not playtested yet. Charger Makoa, 3 cost, no attack, channel sun. Next turn all the units in an area and line of sight take 3 damage and gain disarmed for a turn. So I think, let's see if disarmed is clarified. I think disarmed maybe means you can't use regular attacks. I'm not sure, we'll have to see. It lets you target a long line or thin cone, marking it. That was literally going to be my first suggestion. Rather than making it orbital, make it like a channeled beam directly where it's coming from. Once you've done that, Charger Macau is immobilized, so can't be given a move order. It can be moved by other forces though. Then at the start of the next turn, it takes effects dealing all 3 damage to all units in the beam and disarming them. This is a new keyword which will be using more on an upcoming sword fighter captain. Disarm means can't attack. This is the real theme and utility of the Yi-Aweti. To manipulate and disrupt, we imagine the units squinting and dizzy, blinded from the scorching light, able to move but not land a blow. We imagine the area being pretty long and thin so you can target units far away. With 6 health, it's definitely a weak spellcaster type of unit, but it seems like it'd be a potent disruption and damaging tool if used well. As usual, let me know if you can think of any improvements here. We still have time to take your ideas, so welcome your thoughts. Now this one I do actually have a thought of that I think would be probably more impactful. So, what if, because there's obviously the issue that you don't want it to do instant damage as much, but now the experimental version of the game is instant activations as well, so you can move and move out of it. So what if you had it so that it was like a giant beam? Obviously disarmed is a great part of it, but what is the issue with having the beam activate immediately? Because 3 damage is a lot. But what if it only activated when something moved in the area of the beam? I'm not sure how that feels thematically or anything like that. Or maybe you could have a condition that you can place a beam not touching any enemy units, or that enemy units grant like a shadow or something behind it. But the idea, what I really like the idea, is having a laser beam, or it's like a solar beam, I suppose, across the battlefield, that whenever anything moved across it, it took damage, including potentially more than once per turn. So my thought would be maybe reduce the damage down. I don't think it needs to be 3 damage, although maybe things being a bit more lethal, that could be the case. But if you made it 2 damage and activate immediately, then you could have people push and pull units across. You could use crankbait, chuck and co, Zax, gravity disc is pushback, like everything you can think of that just ticks someone over that line. And every time someone moves in or out of that line, friend or foe, then that deals damage to them. And I would probably consider making Charger Makoa. So if we look here, we've got these sort of like feet down here. I consider having like a clamp of some sort to make it sort of stabilize itself in place so it couldn't be moved necessarily either. That one might be unnecessary, but personally I prefer the idea of a laser beam that's things pulling in and out of it. Makes a big difference, but this is also very cool. The delay I think is a lot harder to make use of now we've got the instant activations on the experimental server, because you can't. Basically, you've got even more ability to react to it. You know, you could deploy into it and move out. Things that are already in it can just move out anyway. It's a really good zoning tool, and I suppose if it's zoning, then 3 damage is reasonable. I just really like the beam idea, just because I think that looks like something that would fit with it. And I think that's a really, really cool one, like a really focused beam. Whereas I think if it's too wide of an area, you know, I don't know if that feels right to be blinding and disarming for me. Maybe disarming and 3 damage is so impactful that actually channeling it is necessary. I don't know. There's just ideas. Let me know what you think in the comments on that one, because it would be interesting to see what your opinions are if they differ from mine. And now for our last one of today, we're going to be looking at Zappa Anenki. Okay, you'll notice the days don't make sense. Like I said, one wasn't numbered, one we've already seen, so don't worry about the numbers not making sense. I promise I'm not skipping any. We still have a bunch of Yi-Aweti units to go through, all with their hokey disruption and non-violent abilities. We'll be releasing all these new units, 10 to 12 of them, in our next big headliner update in the June-ish timeframe. Could change, just a guess, onwards. So it could be that this is June still, but I think it was supposed to be a little bit delayed. After playing with so many smaller cost units for quite a while, it started to feel like we needed something bigger, more powerful, a unit that did something noteworthy with real table presence that made people pay attention as soon as it landed. I think this one started more with a concept than with an ability. We thought about some kind of big shock mace which emanated a lot of electrical power. This feels like a familiar trope, but the great thing about tropes is that they're clear and players get them immediately. Here's what the artist came up with. I mean, this looks kind of cool. It looks like it's sort of like mid-swing, like, you know, sort of you're just doing your first swing of it. You know, that's what's going on here. It's just about to start getting up before it goes round and round and round. So we've got the 3D sculpt, which turned out great. He's a bit hokey and cute, shows off his shock mace well, and is even carrying a small tool back when he was doing more farming and mining than shocking, which gives justification for a small melee attack if we want to add it. Nice, okay. Well, I think it looks terrifying in 3D model as opposed to art concept. That one looks like kind of creepy. Hopefully it's less creepy than the painted one. Okay. After getting the art taken care of, it's time to figure out what the unit actually does. More on how we resolve these dependencies later. It's not as easy as I'm making it sound. We thought we could use the nuisance electrified hotkey. So that was, yeah, after a unit takes an action, deals 1 damage to itself and all touching units. So the big splashy effect when it comes down to electrifies all nearby units, not just enemy, but all units. The universal principle over the 5+ years we've worked on this game, one of the ideas that keeps coming back to us, the idea that players will figure out the ways to use abilities we've never thought of, i.e. every ability, whether buff or debuff, will find uses where you debuff your own units or buff your opponents. We never wanted to prescribe when to use abilities, instead opting to make them as generic and useful as universal as possible. With that in mind, Zappa electrifies everyone around him. It's up to the player to find ways to use that to good effect. Now back to his abilities and stats. 8 cost, which is huge. All units within range have electrified, so he just is a massive dome of electricity. Mace Vortex, pull units in range towards Zappa and Enki and deal 5 damage to them. That is a huge amount of damage. I mean, it's a huge cost, but now things are activating immediately. That is massive. Absolutely massive. He electrifies everyone around him, which means, of course, everything wants to stop moving or take damage unless they want to take damage. Of course, they also deal damage to everything touching, so there's that. The active part of the ability pulls a group of units towards him, then shocks them for 5 damage, and now they're in range of the electrification. So they become electrified, in other words, disruption and mayhem. Okay, and with a mix of non-violence, electrified discourages others from moving and attacking using abilities, and his violence, his Mace Vortex. Okay, this looks a little bit cuter like this. I like that a bit more. That again makes me think of a Nier Automata style robot, which is quite cool. Finally together in game. That is terrifying. I hope you enjoyed this behind the scenes. Look for quite a few more coming your way in every other day or so. Let me know what you think. So again, there's not enough days to fill all of these in, so we've got 3 more to look at, but this is huge damage output. It's really expensive. Really expensive. But activating immediately basically means you've got at least 6 damage minimum on pretty much every single one of your enemy units in range. So if you position badly against this, you're in a lot of trouble. I could almost see this being 2 different units. Like, it feels like a big ball of things that electrify everything in range just as an aura. It's sort of like a defense dome sort of thing. Could be really cool with like a pull effect. I don't know if the actual mace effect is necessary. I feel like it's cool, but it feels like, personally to me, it feels like 2 different units put together. I love the idea of the mace effect and just doing a big thing around it, but that almost feels a bit like Crash, just a sort of an AoE around you. Whereas the electrified feels like a really cool ability. It could be a bit cheaper as a unit, but having like an electrified unit that pulls things into electrify range, that could be really cool. Honestly, I love the mace, but I don't know if the mace is necessary here. I would probably just remove the mace, give it just a vortex, like an electrical encouragement vortex or something like that, you know, just trying to like pull people in and then just worry about putting the mace somewhere else. That would be my preference as a design choice, but all in all, I think this is quite cool. I think there's a lot of potential here. It's going to be a powerhouse. If you can get this on the battlefield, it's going to do a ton of damage. I mean, it doesn't have a melee attack at the moment, but still, 5 damage on the turn you come in. And again, with instant activations now, you're going to have enough Cinder to use this immediately. So you are going to be electrifying and pulling in units. Let me just check the electrify rules. It's after it takes an action, so you pulling it doesn't trigger the electrify, but you can put everything next to each other and trigger more things that way. So I don't know. That one feels a bit disjointed to me. I like it. I like all the different parts of it. I just feel like, to me, it's two different units. The mace thing is cool, just doing a big AoE mace damage thing, and then pulling units into your electrical field seems like another really cool idea. So, I don't know. That one's on the edge for me. I did see someone, the first comment when I scrolled a bit further. It's my favourite so far. But yeah, either way, these are pretty cool. I'm really looking forward to the future of Moonbreaker for this. So, if you've enjoyed this, please do like, comment, subscribe. There will be more coming your way. I'm hopefully going to get back to doing some more Moonbreaker content. And if there's anything you want to see, let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to try and pick up where I can. For now, thank you so much for watching. And most importantly, have a good day.